Hey everybody, it's good to be here. I'm Jake Pena. I use he, him pronouns. I work here at Community Change Action based in DC. And yeah, I'm one of the relational voter program managers. I know the word voter is in there, but we don't only do voter outreach, especially through last year. We did a lot of work and outreach after the American Rescue Plan to a whole group of folks across the country to make sure they knew how the American Rescue Plan was benefiting them in their communities, with an emphasis on doing outreach around the child tax credit. So that's what I'll be talking about today. A portion of that outreach was focused on peer-to-peer texting around child tax credit. It's funny, I actually have a background in this because I used to work at the Center on Budget alongside Jenny and Roxy. So it's great to see y'all again, and some also familiar faces here on Zoom. I've actually got my State Priorities Partnership mug right here too. I'm like channeling that energy from used to working at the center. So I'm excited to be back in this capacity. So yeah, let's talk about peer-to-peer outreach. I'll give a little bit of background on the campaign that we ran last year and why we decided we wanted to do peer-to-peer. And then I'll actually share some slides and show y'all the peer-to-peer model and script that we used to reach folks, as well as some numbers of how many people we contacted and helped to get access to the expanded child tax credit last year. So this was part of a whole campaign at Community Change that was really led by someone else here at the organization, a couple other folks, where they were working with partner organizations much like you across the country to really reach out to people and make sure they were getting the child tax credit, that they understood what the increased amount of child tax credit meant for them and their families, the fact that they didn't need to file taxes to reach that as well. Peer-to-peer was just one part of that. And the peer-to-peer was directly connected to the digital outreach that was done. So we have a whole digital team at Community Change that helped to run ads on Facebook and Instagram mostly, but as well as fresh EBT across the country to show people what was available on AARP and with child tax credit, and to get them to opt into receiving messages from us so that we could send them more information about child tax credit. But also for us on our team, being an organizing department, to get these people's names and try to invite them to organize with us in our weekly spaces that we have, so we could help them reach more people in their community about child tax credit, but also hope that they would join us in the long-term organizing that we're doing that goes into voter registration, civic engagement, and things like that. So it was kind of an experiment the way we did this outreach, but the emphasis really here is on the digital work that we did, the ads that generated names and leads for us to be able to peer-to-peer text and engage about this work. So this is a good time actually for me to share my screen here. Okay, can y'all see the presentation that I'm sharing here? Awesome, thanks. So let's go to the next slide here. And this is going to show actually the kind of the impressions and the impact that we had via digital. So the ads that we were running, like I said, were related to child tax credit. We tested out a number of ads. Some of them were directly like, click here to learn about getting your child tax credit. Others were click here if you want to make the child tax credit expansion permanent for all families. So it was a mix between those. Some of them were like really cool graphics about child tax credit helping families. Others were just more direct information. What you can see here, these are the total impressions that we had, which generated this amount of leads. I actually think this was more of the maybe monthly leads that we got, because total we had more than 30,000 leads that we accrued on this outreach. That was the amount that we were able to text via peer-to-peer. So you can see the conversion rate on the ads that we put for people who actually clicked through and became our leads. The CPA was actually a bit high for some of these ads in total. No, it's definitely higher than what a lot of y'all are looking for. But then the fresh EBT ads were actually a lower CPA, higher conversion rate. We were really getting to have conversations with folks who were more in that lower income bracket, to make sure they were getting child tax credit, and that we were helping them spread the word so they could help people in their communities get it as well. So as you can see on the right side here, this is actually the numbers toward the end of the campaign of how many people we reached, how many conversations that we had specifically on peer-to-peer texting. And for some background on peer-to-peer texting, for those who may not be as familiar, right, these are where we take the list of names and phone numbers that we get from these ads. We upload them into a peer-to-peer texting platform. There's several out there. We used Impactive, which is what we also use for friend-to-friend texting for our relational program. But really the peer-to-peer was so we could have our base of volunteers and some of our organizers on staff send messages to the list of people coming from the ads to make sure, one, that they knew that they qualified for CTC, two, how they could access CTC, and then three as well, how they could come and organize with us so we could help them spread information in their communities to other people who they know as well. So it was helping to access, but it was also a pipeline to organizing with us as well in our weekly organizing spaces. And so we ended up sending more than 32,000 texts to all of these leads, which led to almost 5,000 conversations. So that's actually the back and forth between people who we texted about what is CTC, how do I get it, how do I join you in an organizing space as well. So any questions or things you want me to clarify about the process, or like really the process of getting to this point? Because next I'm going to show you actually the script and what that looked like. And I know we'll have questions at the end as well, but just wanted to flag.
Yes, thank you for that. Please feel free, anyone, to come off of mute if you have a question about the process for Jake that you'd like to ask now, or you can drop something in the chat.
Sounds good. So I'll just talk for a quick moment about the peer-to-peer tools. So there's several out there. Several tools out there. And then I see there's a question there that I'll come back to. So we use Impactive. Like I said, Impactive is formerly known as Outvote. It primarily was a relational organizing tool for people messaging people in their own communities who they knew personally. But we've actually worked with Impactive to help them, develop the tool into more than just friend-to-friend texting. Now it can do peer-to-peer, which is how we did a lot of this. It can also do broadcast texting, a lot of other stuff. So we like to use that because it's all in one. There's several other, peer-to-peer out there. You could do through text. There's Hustle, there's Spoke. All of those tools are pretty similar in how they're used. We like Impactive because we use it for other reasons, and because our volunteers who are already working with us can just use peer-to-peer texting on the app on their phone. So they don't have to have a computer or log in separately to do that. It's all in one. I think there's also different prices for sending messages. I believe some contracts you can get with some of these texting vendors are like you just pay a certain amount in a contract and you get X number of text messages. Others you pay per number of texts that you send. That's how it is with Impactive. Pay per number of messages sent. And then if you're sending an image with those messages as well, whether it's a graphic, an invite to an event, a fun meme, that can increase the amount. But it just depends on contract. So I know those are things to consider if y'all are using peer-to-peer tools. Okay, so question from Polly in the chat, were these paid advertisements? If so, how much of it? So yeah, all of the ads that we put onto social media are paid advertisements. It was everything. The same with Fresh EBT. So we paid for all the ads to go up. I'm not sure of the total cost of the ads that we ran. Maybe reach out to me offline and I'll see if I can get you that information, but you can see the cost per acquisition right here for the ads we ran on Facebook and Instagram, the ads that we also ran on Fresh EBT. I believe we ran some ads on Snapchat as well. I think those are typically a higher CPA, but that's not actually reflected here on the slide.
And Jake, could you share what Fresh EBT is for people who aren't familiar?
Yeah, so my understanding of Fresh EBT is that it is an app that people can use who are trying to access EBT, SNAP, things like that. And so it's just a place where they can go and see the amount of money, to see where they can use that money as well for those resources. And we were able to actually work with the app to run ads on their platform. So people who were in there accessing their benefits could also see an ad about child tax credit, follow up, get more information on it. That was a really good place. I don't know who had the idea from our team, but it was fantastic. That's good to know, Jim. I didn't realize it was renamed too. Thanks for the flag. I should say also, we worked with Code for America to actually provide the link that people would click on to apply for child tax credit to make sure they qualify. It also allowed them to get additional stimulus checks. So our partnership with Code for America was fantastic. And I believe they're still doing this work too. So if y'all want to work with them, I'm sure they'd be open to that. And I know they're continuing it this year. Okay, so we can get to more questions toward the end, if that's okay, because I do want to show y'all the actual script of the peer-to-peer message that we sent to folks. So let's go ahead and jump into it. One, I'll just show y'all what the script looked like, and then I'll kind of break it down a little bit why I wrote it this way. So the initial message that we send on peer-to-peer, right, this is really a message about making sure people know who we are, what the issue is, and then trying to engage them to start a conversation. So a lot of peer-to-peer messages, you try to get someone to respond by saying yes or no, and that's okay. But we really want to get people talking. We want to hear from them. We want to be able to engage them in a kind of a deeper organizing way. And the volunteers who work with us to send these messages, they're trained on doing that. They do organizing in their own circles. And so they really know how to have a conversation with someone about this. And they're able to personally share how this issue impacts them too. And I think that kind of a trusted messenger makes a big difference in having these, right? It's completely okay for staff like myself or other organizers to have these conversations, but the way that we are impacted by these issues may be different. And we may not be able to be as personal or vulnerable for this, to have that kind of a conversation. So I like to have the initial message as something that's going to start a conversation, right? So it's asking a question. And this one here is, do you know about the child tax credit? And then we could get a number of responses, but and I, being the person who writes this peer-to-peer script, I think about all the responses that we could get, right? People saying, yes, I know about it. People saying, no, what is it? People saying, I don't file taxes, so thinking that they don't qualify. So I thought about this on my own, but I also asked some of the volunteers I'm working with, what would you say if I texted this to you? I brainstormed it with my team as well, and that helps to really think about how effective can this script be in having this conversation. So you can see, regardless of what someone texted back, we wanted the link to be the Get CTC link, which was from Code for America. And this would be anyone who clicks on it, regardless of their situation, can learn more about child tax credit. They can figure out if they qualify. Maybe, for example, they don't qualify for child tax credit, but it can tell them how they can get missing stimulus checks, right? All the info is there, so we wanted to give them the link regardless. And of course, thinking about folks who don't file taxes, making sure that we had this in there, because I know that was a big issue, big misinformation last year around child tax credit. More follow-up responses as well. So people always had questions about the advance payments that were going out last year. I know it's a different situation with where we are right now with Build Back Better, but it was helpful to have this on here. Also a follow-up response so that we could invite these people to join us on our organizing space. This was, like I said, we wanted this to try to be a pipeline too, to get people off of peer-to-peer and into our organizing space so we could meet them personally and help them organize people they know in their communities too. That was part of the experiment last year. It wasn't the entire focus, but we did get a handful of people who ended up coming and joining us on Wednesdays, which is really cool because they're still organizing with us today. And then of course, we wanted people to share with folks who they know too. This is similar to like a vote tripling model, if y'all are familiar with that. It's asking people, hey, do you know 3 people who you could turn out to get to vote as well? Instead, it was, can you share this with 5 people you know to make sure they can get the child tax credit as well. So there was a kind of a relational ask built in there as well. People always ask with peer-to-peer messages, is this a scam, especially if money's involved? So thinking about a response to add there to say, this is not a scam, I'm a real person, here's more info about our organization. You know, we just want to make sure you're getting the money you deserve for your kids. So building that in is always important. And I think like making this information conversational, like I said, and having folks know that it's a real person they're talking to can help build up trust. You know, I know we all get text messages and random calls every day. So the more that we can make this like a real human experience, the better. So that's the script, really. I did go into a little bit of reasons of why, you know, we put these exact, you know, messages and responses in here. Again, I thought about it in a way that was like, how can I make this a conversation? How can I make this a way that folks are going to want to engage and respond back about this information? I didn't want to make it too wonky because we could go that route, but I really opted to have more of the information in the links that people could click and figure out on their own. Okay, so that's a script. Let me pause, take a step back, and see what further questions y'all have. Let me just take on Polly's first, that's okay. Were the ads on Fresh EBT specifically for DC? No, the Fresh EBT ads were all over the country. I think we had some specific states we were targeting, but yeah, they were pretty open across the country. What other questions or thoughts do y'all have? And they can be anything on the script specifically, or how peer-to-peer works, if that's not clear, vendors, that kind of thing. So the system we use for sending these texts to people, we use Impactive. I think I mentioned briefly earlier, Impactive is what we have used primarily for relational organizing, but it also has the peer-to-peer texting capability. That's what we use to send these messages. And I actually wouldn't call them mass text, because with peer-to-peer messages, you have to send them individually. So you have to physically like tap a space bar if you're using a computer, or if it's a screen, tap to send each message individually. That's the distinction between peer-to-peer and broadcast messaging. So broadcast messaging is really like a blast to a full list. And typically with broadcast messaging, you have to have people who have already opted in to receiving broadcast text from you. It's a little bit different than peer-to-peer. My understanding with peer-to-peer is you can run ads, and the ad can lead to a petition or a landing page where people sign up. You could peer-to-peer text them, but you can't necessarily broadcast text the same group. Hopefully it's not getting too into the weeds here. So far, we did only send messages in English. We haven't tested out Spanish language messaging. To do Spanish language texting, I would probably tweak the script a little bit more. Of course, I'd make it in Spanish, but I'd probably tweak the way that we're having the conversations, and I would want to make sure that the volunteers texting, you know Spanish, so that way they can actually send more of a personal response to some of the messages, instead of only just like tapping to send the follow-ups based on what people send back to them. But I think doing the outreach in Spanish is really crucial. I actually know that our friends at Unidos have done some Spanish outreach too, Spanish language outreach as well. So they might have more information on that. Another question from Polly, how do we get the phone numbers? So that's where the ads come in. So when we ran these ads, the ads led to, here we go. This shows that the ads we ran. The ads themselves led to a landing page for more information about child tax credit. It's like, put your information in here. So they would type in their name, their number, whatever else it asked for, they would submit, and then we would get them as a lead, or it would be sign a petition to make the child tax credit permanent. And by signing the petition, they opt in to getting messages from us. So then we can take all of the leads, as we call them, who come from the ads, who do the petition, and we can send them a text message. And that's what you're seeing right here. All of these almost 33,000 texts were to people who came from the ads, who opted into getting messages from us. But I see there's a second part to your question. Did volunteers text people they knew as well? Yes, so we did the relational organizing as well, where people volunteering with us would send these messages to people they know as well. I think we had around 800 conversations that were friend to friend, so people messaging in their own communities, which that's pretty successful too. In fact, that's the actual focus of my team, and this peer-to-peer was really an experiment as well that ended up being pretty successful.
And if there aren't any other questions, if no one else has anything they'd like to share, then we will close out. So this is the last call for questions or anything you'd like to share with the group.
I guess I could just say that, while our model for peer-to-peer texting and outreach heavily relies on the work we do with our volunteers, that you don't have to have a whole group of volunteers to help you. I know some of y'all maybe aren't, mainly outreach or organizing, groups, and that's okay. If you did end up running a similar program where you're using peer-to-peer, it could just be you and like some of your staff members, sending these messages and having conversations. And it's possible to dedicate time, just a couple days a week for a couple hours sending messages and responding as well. So it's okay to think about it in that way. If you do have volunteers, great, but if you don't, this is still possible.
Great. Well, thank you again so much, Jake, for being here with us and for sharing your experiences. If you do have questions for Jake later on, please do follow up with him. He's left his contact information in the chat. And we look forward to seeing you on the 17th for our next Tax Time Thursdays. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all. Great to be here.